My name is Olivia Hart. I'm 32 years old. And 3 weeks ago, I watched my brother's face drain out of all color when I walked into our grandfather's inheritance meeting with a man he didn't recognize. He thought I was bringing some random stranger to beg for scraps. He had no idea I was bringing the one person who could expose every lie he'd built his life on. But let me back up, because the moment my brother turned pale wasn't the beginning of this story. It was the ending he deserved. The beginning was 6 months earlier at my grandfather's funeral, when my brother stood at the podium and cried fake tears while telling everyone how close they'd been. How Grandpa had taught him about business and legacy and family values. I sat in the back row, invisible as always, watching him perform grief like he was auditioning for an Oscar. Nobody looked at me. Nobody asked if I was okay. I was just the weird granddaughter who worked some boring job nobody understood and never got married or had kids or did anything worth celebrating. After the service, my mother cornered me in the church parking lot. Her voice was low and sharp. "Olivia, don't make a scene at the reception. Just smile and stay quiet. Your brother is handling everything with the lawyers. You don't need to be involved." Handling everything. Like Grandpa's entire life could be summarized and divided up by my golden child brother who hadn't visited him once in the last 2 years. Have you ever been treated like you're invisible your whole life, only to discover you were the only one someone actually trusted? Stay with me, because what I found in my grandfather's safe deposit box didn't just change the inheritance meeting. It destroyed my brother's entire empire of lies. I wasn't always invisible. When I was 7, I was Grandpa Leo's shadow. While my brother was at baseball practice and piano lessons, I was in Grandpa's workshop watching him restore old furniture. He'd hand me sandpaper and let me smooth out the rough edges of a table leg, explaining how you had to go with the grain, never against it. "People are like wood, Livy," he'd say, using the nickname only he called me. "You can see their true nature if you pay attention to the grain. Some people are oak, solid all the way through. Some people are particle boards, just glued together scraps pretending to be real." I didn't understand what he meant back then. I do now. My brother Wesley was particle board painted to look like mahogany. He learned early that if you smiled right and said the right things, people would believe whatever you wanted them to believe. By high school he was student body president, prom king, the guy everyone loved. I was the girl who sat alone at lunch reading mystery novels and calculating the probability of rain during football games for fun. Our parents adored Wesley. Every family dinner became a celebration of his latest achievement. Scholarship offers. Internships. His college girlfriend who came from money. Meanwhile, I graduated valedictorian and my mother's only comment was, "That's nice, dear. Wesley, tell us about your fraternity's charity fundraiser." I stopped expecting them to notice me. I went to state college on a full academic scholarship, studied data analysis and forensic accounting, and moved 4 hours away to a city where nobody knew my family. I got a job at a mid-sized firm doing financial audits. Boring work. Invisible work. Exactly what everyone expected from invisible Olivia. But Grandpa Leo never stopped calling. Every Sunday at 3 p.m. my phone would ring. "How's my Livy? Are you finding any particle board out there in the corporate world?" We'd talk for an hour. I'd tell him about the accounting fraud I'd uncovered at a manufacturing company, how I'd traced phantom invoices through 6 shell companies. He'd tell me about the rocking chair he was building, how the joints had to fit perfectly or the whole thing would fall apart under pressure. Just like people, Livy. You find the weak joints, the whole structure collapses. Then 2 years ago the Sunday calls stopped. Grandpa Leo had a stroke. Mild, the doctor said, but it changed him. He moved slower. Forgot words sometimes. My parents immediately decided he needed help managing his affairs. That help came in the form of Wesley moving into Grandpa's house. "Just temporarily," my mother explained when she called to tell me. "Your grandfather needs someone responsible nearby. Wesley's between jobs right now anyway, and he's always been so good with people." Between jobs. That was the polite way of saying Wesley had been fired from his 3rd sales position in 5 years for inflating his numbers. But nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about how Wesley's fancy college degree had led to nothing but a trail of exaggerated resumes and angry former employers. I offered to help. I lived 4 hours away, but I could visit on weekends. I could handle Grandpa's finances, make sure his bills were paid, and organize his medical appointments. My mother's response was quick and cutting. "Olivia, your grandfather needs family support, not a spreadsheet. Wesley has this handled." So Wesley moved in. And I kept calling Grandpa every Sunday, except now Wesley often answered. Hey sis, Grandpa's napping. I'll tell him you called. The calls I did get through were different. Grandpa seemed confused, distant. Livy? Oh yes. How are you, sweetheart? Wesley's taking good care of everything. Don't worry about me. His voice sounded flat. Not like the man who used to debate the superiority of dovetail joints over mortise and tenon for an hour. I drove up to visit twice. Both times Wesley greeted me at the door with a big smile and a firm hand on my shoulder, steering me away from Grandpa's bedroom. He's having a rough day. The doctor says too much stimulation isn't good for stroke recovery. Maybe next time, yeah. I should have pushed harder. I should have shoved past my brother and demanded to see my grandfather. But I didn't. Because my whole life I'd been trained to stay quiet. To not make scenes. To let Wesley handle things because Wesley was capable and I was just Olivia. The last time I heard Grandpa Leo's voice was 4 months before he died. I'd called on a Tuesday instead of Sunday, hoping to catch him when Wesley wasn't hovering. Grandpa answered. His voice was weak but urgent. Livy. I need you to know something. The workshop. Under the 3rd floorboard from the window. I left. Grandpa? Grandpa, you okay? Wesley's voice cut through the background. The phone rustled. Then Wesley's smooth tone came through. Hey Olivia. Gramps is having one of his confused episodes. I should go. I'll call you if anything changes. He never called. 6 weeks later my mother left a voicemail. Olivia. Your grandfather passed away last night. Peacefully in his sleep. The funeral is Saturday at St. Michael's. Wesley's handling the arrangements. I played that voicemail 17 times, listening to my mother's voice crack on the word, peacefully, while staying perfectly steady on Wesley's handling the arrangements. I drove up for the funeral in a fog. The service was full of people I didn't recognize, business associates and country club friends who talked about what a shrewd investor Leo Hart had been. Wesley gave a eulogy that made him sound like Grandpa's best friend and protege. He talked about fishing trips I knew had never happened and business advice I knew Grandpa had never given him because Grandpa thought Wesley was all polish and no substance. I didn't speak at the funeral. Nobody asked me to. After the service, I stood by Grandpa's casket while everyone else moved toward the reception hall. I put my hand on the polished wood Grandpa would have appreciated and I whispered, I'm sorry I didn't push harder. I'm sorry I let him keep me away. That's when I heard Wesley's voice from the hallway talking to someone on his phone. His tone was different from the somber grandson act he'd performed at the podium. He sounded excited. Energized. Yeah, the estate should clear probate in about 3 months. The house alone is worth $1.2 million, and that's before we get into the investment accounts. I've been managing everything for 2 years so the lawyer says it's pretty straightforward. Grandpa trusted me with it all. My stomach twisted. I walked into the hallway. Wesley saw me and his expression flickered just for a second before the smooth mask slid back into place. Hey sis. Crazy day, huh? Listen, I need to take this call. We'll catch up at the reception. He walked away before I could respond. And I stood there in that church hallway, understanding for the first time that my brother hadn't moved in to help Grandpa Leo. He'd moved in to position himself as the sole heir. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandpa's last phone call. Under the 3rd floorboard from the window. 3 days later I drove back to Grandpa's house. Wesley's car wasn't in the driveway. I still had my key from when I was a kid, when I'd spent entire summers in that house learning about wood grain and weak joints. I went straight to the workshop. The space smelled like sawdust and linseed oil exactly the way I remembered. Grandpa's tools hung on pegboards, organized by size and function. His workbench was clean, projects half-finished under cloth covers. Everything looked frozen like he'd just stepped out and would be back any moment. I knelt by the window. I counted 3 floorboards. The wood was old, original to the house, and the 3rd board had a small notch on one end, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. I used a screwdriver from Grandpa's bench to pry it up. Underneath was a metal box, the kind you'd buy at an office supply store. No lock. I lifted the lid. Inside were documents. Lots of documents. Bank statements showing regular transfers from Grandpa's main account to an account in Wesley's name. $3,000 a month for the past 18 months. A handwritten ledger in Grandpa's shaky script, listing dates and amounts. At the bottom, a note in red ink. Total taken, $68,000. He thinks I don't notice. I notice everything. There was more. Copies of Grandpa's will, 2 versions. One dated 5 years ago, splitting everything evenly between Wesley and me. And one dated 6 months ago, leaving everything to Wesley except for $10,000 and my tools to Olivia, who understands their value. That recent will had Grandpa's signature. But the handwriting was wrong. I'd seen Grandpa's signature on birthday cards and Christmas checks my entire life. The signature was too smooth, too confident. Post-stroke, Grandpa's handwriting had been shaky, uncertain. This looked like someone had traced the old signature and tried to make it look natural. At the bottom of the box was a business card. Harold Chin, Forensic Document Examiner. On the back, in Grandpa's real handwriting, shaky and desperate, "Livy, trust him." I sat on the workshop floor holding that card and I cried. Not gentle tears. Big, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. As I finally understood. Grandpa had known. He'd known Wesley was stealing from him, forging documents, preparing to take everything. And he'd left me the evidence, hidden under a floorboard like a treasure map for the only person who'd ever cared about his lessons on finding particle boards and weak joints. I took everything. Photographed it all first, then packed it carefully back into the metal box. I locked the workshop behind me and drove straight home, 8 hours round trip on no sleep and gas station coffee. When I got back to my apartment, I called the number on Harold Chen's card. A man answered on the second ring. His voice was gravelly, professional. "Chin Forensic Analysis. Mr. Chin? My name is Olivia Hart. My grandfather was Leo Hart. I believe he may have contacted you before he died." There was a pause. Then, "Miss Hart. I've been waiting for your call." Harold Chin was 73 years old, spoke in precise sentences, and had been a forensic document examiner for 46 years. We met at a diner halfway between our cities, and he brought a folder that made my metal box look like amateur hour. "Your grandfather contacted me 8 months ago," Harold explained, spreading documents across the table between our coffee cups. "He suspected his grandson, Wesley Hart, was forging his signature on financial documents and possibly preparing to contest or alter his will. He wanted evidence but couldn't risk confronting Wesley directly. The stroke had affected his credibility. He knew if he accused Wesley, the family would assume it was confusion or paranoia." I stared at bank transfer authorizations in Wesley's handwriting next to examples of Grandpa's real signature. The differences were obvious once you knew what to look for. Subtle but there. "Your grandfather paid me to build a case," Harold continued. "He provided me with documents Wesley had prepared, samples of his own handwriting from before and after the stroke, and access to his bank accounts to track unauthorized transfers. He was meticulous. He documented everything." "Why didn't he go to the police?" I asked. Harold's expression was sad. As Wesley was smart. Everything was technically legal on the surface. Your grandfather had given Wesley power of attorney for medical decisions after the stroke. Wesley used that authority to gradually expand his control. The transfers could be argued as payment for caretaking. The signature discrepancies could be blamed on stroke-related handwriting changes. Without a full forensic investigation, it would be Leo's word against Wesley's. And Wesley had spent 2 years establishing himself as the devoted, trustworthy grandson while Leo's mental state was publicly declining. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. So he couldn't prove it. "Not alone," Harold said. "But he left you all the tools to prove it for him. And he left me with instructions. If you contacted me before the will was executed, I was to provide you with everything. If you didn't..." He trailed off, shrugging. "Then I suppose he misjudged you." "He didn't," I said quietly. "I just didn't know I needed to look." Harold opened another folder. This one contained the recent will, the one leaving everything to Wesley. This document was filed with the estate attorney 2 months before your grandfather's death. It supersedes all previous wills. But look at this. He placed a magnified photograph next to it showing the signature line. The pressure points are wrong. Your grandfather's stroke affected his right hand, causing a slight tremor. You can see it in his real signature from this period, this wavering in the vertical strokes. But this signature has none of that. It's too clean. This was signed by someone with a steady hand who practiced the signature but didn't account for medical limitations. I felt my pulse quicken. Can you prove that in court? I can prove it to a probate judge, Harold said. That's all we need. Your grandfather was very specific in his instructions. He didn't want a criminal case that would tear the family apart publicly. He wanted the truth established in probate, the real will honored and Wesley removed from any inheritance. He said, and I quote, I want Livy to have what's rightfully hers, and I want Wesley to understand that I was never as confused as he thought. Hearing Grandpa's words spoken in Harold's gravelly voice broke something open in my chest. I had to look away, blinking hard. There's one more thing, Harold said gently. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. My name was on the front in Grandpa's real handwriting, shaky but unmistakably his. He asked me to give you this if you came. I didn't open it at the diner. I waited until I was back in my car parked in the lot with the doors locked and the world shut out. Then I carefully tore the seal. Dear Livy, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you found what I left for you. Good girl. You always were the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what was happening while I was still alive. By the time I understood what Wesley was doing, he'd already poisoned the well. Your parents thought I was declining mentally. Any accusation I made would have been dismissed as confusion. And I couldn't risk him knowing I was onto him. You would have just gotten better at hiding it. I chose you to be my executor of truth because you're the only one who ever paid attention. You're the only one who learned to see the grain in people, to find the weak joints. Wesley is all weak joints, honey. He's held together by nothing but charm and lies, and I need you to apply the right pressure so the whole structure collapses. Don't let him get away with this. Not for my sake I'll be gone, but for yours. Because if you let people like Wesley win, you teach yourself that invisibility is safer than standing up. And you, Olivia Hart, were never meant to be invisible. You were meant to be the one who sees what everyone else misses and does something about it. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this family the way I should have. Go with the grain. Grandpa Leo. I sat in that car and cried for the second time in a week. But these weren't grief tears. They were fuel. Over the next 2 months, I worked with Harold to build an airtight case. We compiled every piece of evidence. The forged will, the unauthorized transfers, the timeline of Wesley's increasing control over Grandpa's affairs. Harold connected me with a probate attorney named Simone Wu who specialized in contested estates. Simone was sharp, no-nonsense, and expensive. She reviewed everything and gave me a grim smile. Your brother is going to fight this. He's going to claim your grandfather was mentally incompetent and that you're a bitter, estranged granddaughter trying to steal what was rightfully promised to the devoted caretaker. It's going to get ugly. Let it get ugly, I said. I want him exposed. Good, Simone replied. Because that's exactly what's going to happen. The inheritance meeting was scheduled for a Friday in mid-October, 3 months after Grandpa's death. Wesley had been texting me leading up to it, playing the concerned brother role. Hey sis, don't stress about the meeting. It's just formality. Grandpa left you some tools and a little money. I'll make sure you get everything you're owed. I know this has been hard on you. If you need help with anything, let me know. We're family. I didn't respond to any of it. But I did prepare. The meeting was held at the estate attorney's office, a gray-suited corporate lawyer named Arthur Penn who'd handled Grandpa's affairs for 20 years. Wesley arrived with our parents. I arrived with Harold Chin. The moment Wesley saw Harold, his smile faltered. He didn't recognize the old man, but he knew I wouldn't bring a stranger without a reason. Olivia, my mother said, her voice tight with forced pleasantness. Who is this? This is Harold Chin, I said calmly. Forensic document examiner. Grandpa hired him 8 months before he died. The color drained from Wesley's face. Not slowly. All at once, like someone had pulled a plug. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. My father frowned. Forensic? What are you talking about? Arthur Penn, the estate attorney, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should begin the meeting. Everyone, please sit. We sat around a large conference table. Arthur at the head, Wesley and our parents on one side, Harold and me on the other. It felt like a battlefield arranged in polished wood and leather chairs. Arthur opened a folder. I'll be reading from the last will and testament of Leo Patrick Hart, dated March 15th of this year, filed with this office on March 22nd. The will states. Before you continue, Simone Wu's voice cut through the room. She'd entered quietly and now stood at the door, her briefcase in hand. I'm Simone Wu, representing Olivia Hart. We're formally contesting the validity of that document. Arthur blinked. I'm sorry, on what grounds? Simone walked to the table and placed a folder in front of him. On the grounds that it's a forgery. Wesley shot to his feet. That's insane. This is ridiculous. Grandpa was in his right mind when he made that will. I was there. I helped him. Sit down, Mr. Hart, Simone said coolly. We'll get to your involvement. What followed was 2 hours of methodical destruction. Harold presented his forensic analysis, walking Arthur Penn through every discrepancy in the signature, every suspicious transfer, every timeline inconsistency. Simone provided legal precedent for voiding fraudulent wills and presented the earlier will, the real will, splitting everything evenly. My mother kept whispering, "This can't be true." Wesley wouldn't. My father sat stone-faced, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Wesley tried to defend himself. He claimed Grandpa's handwriting had changed naturally after the stroke. He insisted the transfers were payment for caretaking. He said he'd never forget anything, that this was a misunderstanding, that I was bitter and jealous and trying to steal from the family. Then Simone played her final card. She pulled out a recording device and pressed play. Grandpa's voice filled the room, shaky but clear. It was dated 1 month before he died. This is Leo Patrick Hart. I'm recording this in the presence of Harold Chin, forensic examiner, and Dr. Angela Ruiz, my neurologist. I want to state for the record that I am of sound mind and body, as certified by Dr. Ruiz yesterday. I am making this statement because I have discovered that my grandson, Wesley Hart, has been forging my signature on financial documents and has presented me with a will that I did not sign. I have pretended not to notice because I fear confrontation will lead him to take more aggressive action. I am leaving this evidence with Harold Chin and my real will, dated 2019, with my attorney Benjamin Cross. I want my estate split evenly between my grandchildren Olivia and Wesley, though Wesley deserves nothing. But I won't cut him out completely because I don't want Olivia to carry guilt. I just want the truth known. I want my Livy protected. That's all I've ever wanted. Silence. Total, absolute silence. My mother was crying. My father looked like he'd been struck. Wesley sat frozen, his face ashen. Arthur Penn closed the folder with the forged will. I'll need time to review this evidence with the court. But based on what I've seen today, I'm suspending the execution of the march pending a full investigation. Wesley found his voice, strangled and desperate. I took care of him. I gave up 2 years of my life. You stole from him, I said quietly. Every eye turned to me. You isolated him. You forged documents. You tried to steal my inheritance. And you thought you'd get away with it because I'm invisible, forgettable Olivia who never makes a scene. I stood up. I looked at my parents. You taught me to stay quiet. To let Wesley handle things. To not embarrass the family. But Grandpa taught me something better. He taught me to pay attention. To find the weak joints. I turned to Wesley. You're all weak joints, Wesley. And now the whole structure is collapsing. I walked out of that office with Harold and Simone behind me, leaving my family in ruins. The legal battle took 4 months. Wesley hired an expensive attorney with money he didn't have, probably borrowed against the inheritance he thought he'd secured. He tried everything, claiming Grandpa had been manipulated by me during his final months. I hadn't seen him in person for 8 months. Arguing that the recording was coerced, Dr. Ruiz testified it wasn't. Insisting the signature analysis was junk science. 3 independent examiners confirmed Harold's findings. Nothing worked. In February, the probate judge ruled the March will invalid. The 2019 will was upheld. Grandpa's estate, valued at $1.8 million including the house, investments and belongings, was split evenly between Wesley and me. But here's the thing about legal victories. They're only satisfying if the other person loses something beyond money. Wesley lost everything. The $68,000 he'd stolen had to be repaid with interest. His half of the inheritance barely covered it. By the time legal fees were deducted, he walked away with $127,000 from an estate worth nearly $2 million. I walked away with $900,000 in Grandpa's workshop, which I'd specifically requested be excluded from the monetary split and awarded to me as a personal item of sentimental value. The judge agreed. But money wasn't the real prize. 3 weeks after the ruling, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Olivia. Her voice was small, broken. Can we talk? We're talking now, I said. In person. Please. Your father and I, we need to apologize. I met them at a neutral coffee shop. They looked older, worn down in a way I'd never seen before. My father's hands shook as he held his coffee cup. We failed you, he said. No preamble. Just straight to the wound. We spent your entire life treating you like you didn't matter, and we were wrong. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled it away. We believed Wesley because he was easy to believe, she continued. He told us what we wanted to hear. You made us uncomfortable with your questions and your intensity, so we pushed you aside. We're so sorry, Olivia. We're so desperately sorry. I looked at both of them. Waited for the vindication to feel good. It didn't. It just felt empty. Grandpa tried to tell you, I said quietly. Not directly, but in small ways. He left me things in his workshop. He talked about me in conversations you didn't bother to listen to. And you ignored all of it because Wesley was easier. More palatable. We know, my father whispered. We know, and we have to live with that. Yes, I agreed. You do. And I have to decide if I want you in my life, knowing that the only reason you're here is because I proved I was worth something. Not because you love me. Because you're embarrassed. My mother flinched. That's not. It is, I interrupted. You're here because I embarrassed Wesley. Because I exposed your golden child as a thief and a fraud. If I'd lost that case, if the forged will had stood, you wouldn't be here apologizing. You'd be at Sunday dinners with Wesley, talking about how sad it is that I couldn't just be happy for him. They didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. I stood up. I don't forgive you. Maybe someday, but not now. I need you to understand that you don't get to be proud of me now that it's convenient. You had 32 years to be proud of me and you chose not to. That was your choice. This is mine. I left them sitting there. I didn't look back. Wesley tried to contact me once, about a month later. A long email about how we were still family, how we could move past this, how he'd made mistakes but he'd always loved Grandpa and never meant to hurt anyone. I deleted it without finishing. Because here's what I learned from Grandpa Leo's final lesson. Some people are oak, solid all the way through. Some people are particle boards, just glued together scraps pretending to be real. And when you find a particle board, you don't repair it. You replace it. I sold Grandpa's house to a young couple who promised to keep the workshop intact. I kept his tools and moved them into my own home where they hang on pegboards in my garage. Sometimes I go out there and sand down a piece of wood going with the grain, and I talk to Grandpa like he's still here teaching me about joints and pressure points. I used my inheritance to start a forensic accounting consultancy specializing in elder financial abuse. Harold Chin sits on my advisory board. We've helped 12 families expose fraud in the last 6 months. Each case feels like honoring Grandpa's memory by doing what he taught me. Paying attention, finding the weak joints, and applying pressure until the truth comes out. My parents send birthday cards now. Cautious messages about wanting to rebuild. I haven't responded yet. Maybe I will eventually. Maybe I won't. The thing about being invisible your whole life is that when you finally step into the light, you get to decide who's worth seeing you. Wesley moved to another state. I heard through distant cousins that he's working in car sales, using his charm to convince people to buy things they don't need. Some people never learn. Some people are particle boards all the way down. But me, I learned. I learned that being underestimated is only a weakness if you believe it. I learned that invisibility can be a strategic advantage. And I learned that the quietest people in the room are often the ones paying the closest attention. Grandpa Leo knew that. He spent 2 years playing confused and weak while documenting every move Wesley made. He let Wesley think he'd won right up until the moment he left me the tools to dismantle everything. That's the thing about oak versus particle board. The particle board looks solid until you apply pressure. Then it crumbles. Oak just gets stronger under stress. It holds the joints together. It lasts. I'm oak. I always was. I just needed someone to teach me to see it in myself. And now, every time I walk past that workshop in my garage, I hear Grandpa's voice. Go with the grain, Livy. Always with the grain. I am. And I always will. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the invisible one in your family or had someone underestimate you completely, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because I'm bringing you more stories about people who were counted out, pushed aside and dismissed, but who found their strength and fought back. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever exposed someone who thought they were smarter than you? Or has someone in your family ever stolen something that was rightfully yours? I read every single comment and your story might be featured next. Remember, being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's an opportunity. Use it wisely. And always go with the grain.